and they're figuring it out. Maybe that's it. Just,
Yes.
And they're fucking on the regular.
Yes.
You know, just something quite simple.
And they're fucking on the regular. That's all I want.
Good. Welcome to Rom-Com Bomb, a sex ed with DB podcast series where in every episode we go under the covers with a beloved rom-com, strip away its hidden toxic messages, and rewrite the script on love and sex. Here are my top 3 favorite things I love about Uberlube. Number 1, Uberlube makes sex feel a lot more pleasurable. It's as simple yet as powerful as that. Number 2, Uberlube is recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list is widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. And number 3, Uberlube will not stain clothing or bedding. Any spills can be easily cleaned with detergent and water. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at uberlube.com. Are you falling into a pattern with your partner? Looking to change things up but aren't sure how? Me and my partner exit our ordinary with Lion's Den. Lion's Den has hundreds of your favorite brands to help you and your partner reconnect or try something new. From novices to dungeon masters, there are products for every comfort level. With 50 plus years in business, Lion's Den is here to help. Can't make it to a local store? Shop online and chat with a customer service team member while you shop. Lion's Den offers our listeners 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com.
Vanderpump Robs is the reality TV podcast that is worth your time. Sure, you could scroll through the same recycled social media takes, but on Vanderpump Robs, I do things a little differently. I break down Bravo's biggest shows like Southern Hospitality, The Valley, Summer House, Southern Charm, and of course Vanderpump Rules. And I do it through a cultural and comedic lens, because reality TV isn't just about guilty pleasures, it's a funhouse mirror of the society that watches it. So if you're into sharp analysis with just the right amount of snark and no silly voices, subscribe to Vanderpump Robs wherever you get your podcasts. And for bonus and ad-free content, join Vanderpump Robs Premium at patreon.com/VanderpumpRobs.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Rom-Com Bomb. I'm your host, DB, sex educator, pleasure expert, and rom-com critic. Today we have a very, very cool and special guest. We have writer, actor, podcast host, and TV host, Brandon Kyle Goodman. And you know them from a lot of things, first of all. You know them from Big Mouth, their podcast, Tell Me Something Messy, which, spoiler alert, I was a guest on, and it's going to come out really soon, so look out for that. And as a host of E's Recap, we are so excited to have them here to talk about one of the most beloved rom-coms of the early 2000s. Brandon, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking about rom-coms. So this is actually perfection. I love a rewatch. I'm so happy to be here.
It is, yeah, it really scratches like a nice part of my brain to kind of rewatch some of these films that we've seen. I'll speak for myself. 50 times at least.
At least.
Oh my gosh.
In the last week, 50 times.
Listen, it's been a hard January and February.
Listen.
Okay? We need to settle into what feels good and also maybe revisit some of the parts that aren't so good and maybe rewire our brain a little bit. And so here is the trivia teaser that you heard last week. The real life story behind this rom-com started with a law student who didn't fit in at school. She turned her experiences into a manuscript, one that an agent only noticed because it was printed on pink paper. True story. Today, we have a jaw drop. We're reviewing Legally Blonde. Brandon, what is your feeling about this? What's your relationship to this movie? Tell me.
So my mom is an actress, and she used to get screeners when screeners were like on, if you know what that is, it's like basically movies will promote themselves by sending to different union members. Yeah, copies. And so I believe we either had it, I think it was either a DVD or a VHS. I can't remember which, but we did have the screener. And so I would watch it all the time. I was like low-key kind of obsessed with the movie, and then followed it when it became a TV show to become a musical. Because remember, it became a Broadway musical, and there was
I've MTV. Seen it 3 times on Broadway.
There you go. I've actually never seen it. Oh, yeah, you guys. Yes.
So good.
I know the music, but I don't think I've ever seen it. But I remember there was like a TV show that was, I think Laura Bell Bundy was the original on Broadway. And so there
They
was
were
like
like
a,
searching for her.
yes, something like that, right? It was like an MTV show searching for or the journey to Broadway, and so I was obsessed with that. So yeah, I loved it, and I think it came out while I was in high school, and I went to boarding school in Rome, Georgia. So it was one of my, if we talk about like having a coping kit, because I was in a small town Georgia, Black, queer, whatever. So it was one of those movies that I would watch that would make me feel better. That and Sister Act 2.
Oh, incredible. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Another gem.
I love hearing your comfort films. Yeah,
Yes.
I fucking love this movie. I honestly like, the theme of this show of Rom-Com Bomb is that we, basically share the hidden toxic messages and rewrite the script on love and sex. And I was fucking racking my brain as to, every film has something.
Yeah, sure.
This one is a hard one because I adore it so much. It's kind of like my big fat Greek wedding where I'm like, what this
Another
film can
great
do
one.
no wrong. Like it's so funny and silly and it is iconic. There's so many lines that we still say today, 25 years later.
I mean, the bend and snap of it
all. We'll get to that, my friend. We will get to that.
Yes.
So this movie is from 2001, and here is a quick refresh. Here's a rundown if you need a refresher. Elle Woods, played by the Reese Witherspoon, is a bubbly sorority queen who follows her ex-boyfriend Warner to Harvard Law School in an effort to win him back. But once she's there, she realizes she doesn't need him or anyone else to prove her worth. What starts as a revenge plan turns into a journey of self-discovery, ambition, and of course, the bend and snap. So yeah, I just absolutely love this film. And we're going to transition now to our first real segment here of as a kid. And so this idea is kind of like, what is one word that really, you're saying it's your comfort film. What's that one word that would describe your relationship to this film as a kid?
Is safe space a one word?
We'll put a hyphen in it.
Okay, yeah, safe space. Yeah,
yeah. And what about it felt so safe to you?
I understood what it was like to be different. I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm non-binary. And so to be in, my mom sent me to a lot of private schools, a lot of PWIs, predominantly white institutions. And so I was often the other. And I think that Elle Woods is very much, she starts very much the popular one, but then moves into a new space and becomes othered. And I think I felt that it came out in 2001, which would have been my first or second year of high school. And so in middle school, I had been with those kids since first grade. So high school, I went to boarding school in Rome, Georgia. I'm originally from New York, so you can imagine the culture shock. But going from knowing all my classmates and having an established position in school to then going to this new school that was kind of like a massive Hogwarts in the South was I didn't fit in necessarily immediately and had to learn how to win people over, if you will.
Okay, here's my follow-up though. Did you kind of have the same arc as Elle where you were kind of the kid who everyone was like, whoa, what's going on with this New Yorker? What's the deal here? And then slowly but surely you become valedictorian of the school?
Yes, it was similar to that. Yeah, it was by the time I graduated, people were very cool with me. And I actually at senior party did a keg stand and won by the last, I was the senior party. It's the last thing.
Dog.
I did that keg stand. I did it. I outdid it. Everyone else. It was low key because I think there was something wrong with it, and so they had me in the air.
You're sharing all the secrets. You're it was broken, so
it was actually kind of broken. But I was my legs were up for so long that I won all the respect of the boys.
Wow.
So yeah, I did do it at the end.
I absolutely love that. You're listen, I'm going to tell you the truth. It was broken, but I did win everyone's respect.
I won their respect, and that's what matters.
Wow. Yeah, I feel one word that describes my relationship to this film is silly. I just thought that it was so fun and goofy and silly. And I love that they made these really hot women kind of funny and cool in this way. And that Reese Witherspoon, I just think it's funny that someone like Reese Witherspoon in this film doesn't fit in because it's Harvard Law School and because she her parents are Harvard Law School, you can do something so much better with your life. Like it's
Yes.
set up to like be this silly thing. Her admissions video is
Oh
so
my
silly.
God.
Like it's the whole thing is just camp. Like I just think it's very, very fun and ridiculous.
Yes.
What do you think is really fantastic about this movie that still holds up 25 nearly years later?
It's joyful. Do you know?
Yes.
I think no matter what, like if you're like, I'm in a bad mood, like I watched it on I watched on a Sunday night. We were doing the SAG Awards for E later that night. And so I was like, oh, I like a slow morning
Mm.
because we work super late because we record after the award ceremony's done. So
Mhm.
I like have a slow morning. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, why don't I watch this movie? I need to do this rewatch. And it just put me in such a great mood. Like it was just like fun and colorful and pink and
Yes.
silly and so joyful. Is I think it still holds up as a joyous movie.
I want to know, we're going to do the rating before the rewatch. So I asked you to rate the film before we rewatched it so we can
Yes.
compare our pre and post watch ratings. But yeah, first we got to go over our rating system. So
Great.
it's 1 to 5 VOMs. 1 VOM is it's dated, mostly harmless. 5 VOMs, big yikes. We're burning the VHSs and the DVDs of this
Yes.
film because it's so offensive. So what did you rate this film before the rewatch?
Well, I am always going to assume if a movie came out before 2020 that there might be some problems. So
Right.
the further back, I just assume. So I gave it like a 2 because I was
Okay.
assuming that there's probably something I'm going to have an issue with. So
Pretty political. You're like,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not going all the way to the
I'm not going to
beginning.
one. Yeah,
We're
I'm-
not, we still love it. So we're going for a 2.
I'm gonna start with the 2. Yes.
I agree. I mean, I think I see this movie once a year and I'm 32. And basically since I was a kid, I've seen this movie at least once a year.
Yes.
So I have it quite fresh in my mind. And I'm one of those freaks who, you know, I see a movie a few times and then I can recite it just because I
Yes,
just
of
have one
course.
of those minds.
Yeah.
I feel like you as a multi-hyphenate definitely are like this.
Yes.
And so I think for me, I think I even gave it a 1 because I was like, I don't think there's going to be much wrong with this.
Yeah.
So let's transition into the
Okay.
main part of the show called
Great.
That's Problematic. So we pick like 2 or 3 kind of major themes of the film, and then we're going to see what exactly is going on in here.
Great.
And if you have other themes, I want to hear them. I want you to
Beautiful.
bring them up.
Lovely.
So the first one we have is feminism, but make it marketable and very, very white, right? So
Incredibly so.
let's
I'm glad
begin-
that's a theme. Yes.
let's begin there.
Yeah.
So, you know, we are also guilty of this, calling it, I am calling it feminist, right? But, you know, it's very white, it's very upper class feminism, and Elle's privilege is just kind of never questioned. And
Yes.
the kind of question I have in here is like, would a woman of color or a working class woman have had the same chances at Harvard? You know, her big like triumph still exists within this like elite patriarchal system. She doesn't actually change Harvard. She just kind of proves that she, as a hot white woman, belongs there. There's kind of no attempt to change the system here. She's just kind of happy to be accepted within it. And the last piece that I have here is that like Harvard's law school and courtroom settings somehow also contain 0 visible racial diversity, reinforcing this like unspoken rule that only women who fit a specific look, aka white, blonde, conventionally beautiful, get to be in these spaces.
Yes.
So give me your thoughts on this. What came up for you about this?
Well, that was kind of the first thing that I forgot and like
Right.
noticed right away. I was like, oh, everyone is white. The extras are white. Everyone in this space, I was like, they didn't even a black girl in your sorority. There's not an Asian girl in your sorority, Indian girl, like like all the people speaking, and even when she gets to Harvard, until we meet the judge, which I was like, well, thank goodness,
Right.
the judge is black, is a black woman, but everyone was white, and I was like, oh, that is interesting. This is part of the fantasy, but also this like line where I kind of can believe this. Like, yeah, of course you're a beautiful blonde white woman. Of course, when you submit a video in your bikini, this room of just straight white men go, let her in. Yeah, why aren't we talking about that? There actually needs to be more conversation about that. So yeah, the white, I wrote in my notes, white privilege is overflowing.
Ooh, beautifully put.
That it is abundant in this space from both the story standpoint, but also I'm thinking about it as a writer, from a writing, directing, casting standpoint. There's just not even like a lot of effort to say, well, this role doesn't really need to be a white person. Like we could put a person of color in here or a queer person. Also, the queerness, zero queerness. There's the lesbian.
Except for the yes, there is the
The
lesbian who's
lesbian
obsessed
classmate,
with Berkeley and obsessed with like kind of doing
something
doing and saying these things that are just make her in this box of
puts her in a
lesbian.
box. Yes,
And then there is the gay pool boy
of
who
course, the gay
is
pool boy
outed in the
in the
court as
courtroom.
a joke.
Yes, yeah. So like you're like, okay, cool. Like these characters are here, right? He's a Latin queer person, so they're here, but they're very much, and this is my frustration as an actor of color in this industry, a Black actor, is that you have a purpose to service the white protagonist. You don't have agency
Mhm.
on your own. One of my close friends, Griffin Matthews, who's on Dear White People and on Flight Attendant and She-Hulk, we talk about how oftentimes he will get cast in these roles and they'll never give him a husband. They'll never give him a
Mm,
family, right? Like that he's often playing the best friend or the colleague, but that you never go home with his character. And
mm,
so, the same thing is true here. Like we're never going home or getting to know any of those diverse characters. It's all in
right.
service of your white protagonist.
Yeah, I guess a follow-up I have for you as a
Hmm.
writer, like, obviously, the writer's room also looks very different 25 years later. Like, the
Yes,
writer's
absolutely.
room is much more diverse, much more different kinds of bodies, much more different racial diversity, much
Hmm.
more gender diversity, sexuality, like, folks who have different abilities. Like, there's a lot of difference now.
And can I hold you there?
Please.
Much more in terms of like they exist as opposed to years ago, we'd say they didn't exist at all.
Right.
But it's still not.
Not
It's
as good.
still no. Like if you're looking at 100 writers, I would say two of them are of color. Like
Still
it's
very
yeah,
bad,
it's still
actually, I
like
would
yeah.
say.
If you look at the stats, like it's very minimal of who's is Black or who's of color, who's queer. I mean, who of those are holding positions of power? Right? We're actually still. It's quite pathetic.
How do we
Actually.
like continue to speak about this and fight about it? Like who is like talking about this all the time and what organizations are working to change this?
I mean, I think it's just these conversations. For example, Joy Reid was just fired. By the time this comes out, it'll be probably a month later. But when we're recording, Joy Reid was just fired from MSNBC. Her show was canceled. And if you don't know, Joy Reid is a Black journalist, political commentator. She has a show on MSNBC called The Readout. She's one of the only, I think, the only Black woman who has a solo primetime spot, and one of like maybe three Black anchors that have solo spots, and they've all been fired, or their shows have been canceled. And there's some replacements happening. But Rachel Maddow, who has been on air for a very long time, just basically used her show, her airtime, to call it out,
Mm,
to call out how disappointed she is in that, and to note that MSNBC has let go, some of their uh, uh, anchors of color, and how you know interesting and indefensible that is. So
right.
that is what we do. We talk about it. Like people need to talk about it in other spaces and publicly, so
Mhm.
that it creates pressure. What we've seen, I got my platform in 2020 based off of people following my videos around what was happening with, race, gender, sexual orientation, allyship. But there was allyship fatigue that quickly happened. And so what we saw in 2020, though, was that like this pendulum swing of DEI, right? Everyone was like, oh, yes, we want diversity and inclusion and
Right.
equity. And how do we do it? Although they weren't really trying to pay people to who were Black or queer. But anyways,
To
that's a
do
different
that labor.
conversation. Yeah, to do that labor. But they wanted it. They were like, we're going to support it. We're going to build these programs. We're going to, hire these people. And then slowly, even before our new president, or I guess recurring president,
Right.
you start to see in different networks people who were in charge of DEI getting let go, that they were quietly being let go. And then after inauguration, we saw all these companies, from Target to McDonald's to all of them being like, fuck this, it's gone, right? And so it's no longer profitable for them. And so the audience's willingness to say, no, we want queer characters, we want Black characters, we want Asian characters, we want these stories and we support these stories and we show up for these stories is what adds pressure to the powers that be. Because, bottom line is, where's the green coming from?
If I were to tell you I was conducting a masturbation experiment with the magic wand, what would some of your hypotheses be? Well, I did do a masturbation experiment with the magic wand, so let me tell you what some of mine were. Number 1, anxiety, tension, and stress will decrease during and after daily magic wand use. Number 2, daily magic wand use will be associated with improved mood, confidence, and happiness when compared with no sexual activity. And number 3, sleep length and sleep quality will improve during daily magic wand use when compared to no sexual activity. After running the numbers, 2 of those hypotheses were true, and one of them is false. Want to know which ones were true and which one was false? Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment to learn more about the experiment. Read some of my daily journals and watch some of my daily vlogs, and find the results of these hypotheses and a few others, and so much more. When you're traveling, you don't have access to your amazing sex goodie stash. So you start to pack your lube for sexy time in your toiletry bag. And when you open your bag back up, the lube you packed, of course, spills all over your toothbrush, makeup, and floss picks. Enter a brand new product from Uberlube that will get your lube to your destination without spillage. They're new good-to-go travelers. Perfect for your purse, pocket, gym bag, or carry-on luggage. The Good To Go Traveler features the same Uberlube product in a discreet aluminum traveler that comes in 6 colors. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at uberlube.com. You know you love your partner deeply, but your sex life hasn't been the best. You try to spice things up, but get overwhelmed and feel confused as to why your intimacy has been waning. This is a story I hear again and again, so know that you're not alone. I recently started working with an incredible brand called Aria, and I want to tell you about them. Aria is a service for couples that makes it easy to break out of routine, deepen emotional connection, and energize their relationship with curated experiences called scenes. You will also receive access to the Aria concierge, who's like your relationship's wingman, a real person, not a robot, who feels out your vibe and serves up spicy monthly experiences for 2. Plus, hand-picked premium items delivered discreetly and directly to your door. If this sounds like just the thing you need, don't wait. Pause this episode and visit arya.fyi and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off now. Because your partnership deserves it. In a world that constantly encourages you to change, it's bold to just be yourself. Sexual expression and satisfaction are different for everybody, so rather than conforming to others, focus on falling in love with who you are. Lion's Den sources the very best products to help you find what you like, and to help you feel confident expressing your sexual desires. You can get 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com to begin exploring everything about yourself. Follow them on social at Lions Den Adult on Instagram and TikTok. You rock. I could listen to you talk all day. It's such an important conversation. And I think like we talk about it all the time in the context of like, if there are more diverse groups of people behind the camera, there will be more diverse people in front of the camera.
Yes.
And I think that, super important. We talked to 2 folks who came out with a film called Good Bad Things, all about being physically disabled and what's it like being physically disabled on the dating apps. And that film was supported, executive produced, starred in by people with physical disabilities. And so I think like it makes it's so obvious, like, duh, obviously this should be happening, but it most of the time does not happen. And I think like bringing it back to Legally Blonde, right? Like I think there are even only two like Black characters in the Bend and Snap crew. And like,
Yes.
there's maybe one insinuated gay character when he
There's
goes,
one who comes out at the end with
the
like,
Bend
the
and
bed and
Snap
snap. And it's
works
like,
every time.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there are people, but like you said, there's no substance to them.
No,
and
it's a
we don't go
performance.
home with them. Exactly.
Yes, it's a performance of equity and inclusion, or not even equity. It's a performance of diversity, but it's not actual diversity or inclusion. Those people's experiences do not influence the story. They don't shape the story. And like, there's two folds to that, which is, sorry, I will nerd out with you on this.
Please.
Which is, you want diverse characters, but you also don't want their storylines to be about their identity, right?
Exactly.
I always say on Big Mouth when we were, and that show has a lot of different types of characters, but I would always be like, I want the gay character who just cheats on the math test, right? It's not about him coming out of the closet. It's not about the trauma of, people not accepting him. It's like, he cheated on a math test, right? Like, like gay kids cheat on math tests too, right? Like, so it's just like, how can we allow these people to exist, but also give them human stories, allow them to just exist in their humanity as opposed to their identity.
Right. And that's just a part of them. It's like not the whole thing
It's not the whole thing. Yes. It influences it. But, my friends and I always talk like, I'm not walking around 24/7 going, I'm Black, I'm gay. Oh, I'm Black and I'm gay. Like, there are moments where, it influences how I might be perceived or experienced show up in the world. And certainly, but it's not how I wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to move through my day. I'm moving through my day as Brandon. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'm looking for to be reflected on camera, is that these characters are moving through their days as themselves. Yeah. And then, it's influenced by their womanhood or their race or their ethnicity or their religion, but that is not their entire identity.
Right. And like, kind of getting back to the film, like we said earlier, we wanted to talk through this like Callahan sexual assault kind of piece. And I think that I'm so interested to kind of dig deeper into this. So for folks who, again, haven't seen this film in a long time, if you haven't done the rewatch, there's a scene where Callahan invites Elle into his office in order to ask her where she's going to be a summer associate next summer. And she's like, I haven't really thought of it. And he's like, oh, you're brilliant. Like, you should apply to work with me, basically. And she kind of says, okay, well, I didn't really even think about that. And he's like, you know what competition is all about, right? And he gets really gross about it. And he's like, it's about having animal instincts and seeing how far the other person will go. How far will Elle go? And he starts to touch her leg, right?
Yeah.
And she immediately slaps him away and says, are you hitting on me? And he goes, well, you're a beautiful girl. I'm a man who knows what he wants. And she goes, well, I'm a law student who just realized her professor is a pathetic asshole, and walks away, right?
Yes.
So this is like the whole scene that happens. And I think like, for me, as a young girl, I'm 32. This film came out in 2001. I was like 9 years old when I first watched this film. I just saw this as like normal, that like he was hitting on her, and because he was more powerful than her, that this was not inappropriate. It was just like something that a woman would have to deal with.
Yeah.
And rewatching it as an adult, it has been kind of mind-blowing how common these kinds of occurrences are in these kinds of films, and how frustrating it is that even though she stands up for herself and even though she wins in the end, like, he is still running his own firm and he is still able to have power and teach that class the next semester. And it just really angers me and frustrates me that this is so normal.
It was interesting to rewatch it because it's been a while since I've seen it, and to now download it as sexual assault. I don't think when I watched it,
we didn't have that language.
I didn't have that language, so I was just like, oh, he hit on her. That's terrible. And this is kind of a twofold, because we're thinking about a movie that came out in 2001. I'm thinking about, as they're writing it, what are you allowed to talk about to get your movie greenlit? And so the importance of showing this scene, but then there may be notes that you can't talk too much about it or go too directly into it, because then does it rob the, and I'm not saying this is Brandon, but like, does it rob the movie of its joy, or like will the audience be able to, all the things. But I think what I was most frustrated by watching it this time around was the responses from both Holland Taylor's character, her female teacher in the
Yes.
beginning, and from Luke Wilson's character.
Oh, you were disappointed in that.
Yeah, that they weren't like, because when Vivian says she saw,
She's like, you almost had me fooled.
Yes, yeah. And then Emmett, who's Luke Wilson, says something about like, no, he made a pass at her.
Oh, right.
I felt like he hit on her, and it was like, no. He crossed the line. It was he assaulted her. And if that's the girl that you are into, I'd be pissed.
Right.
I would be livid. I'm not working for this man no more.
Right. Quit.
He tried to assault this girl that I'm in love with. I would be fucking that man up. You know what I'm saying? Right. So like, I was like, oh no, y'all are too cool and calm about this. Right. It was too normalized, right?
Exactly.
And even Holland Taylor says, are you going to let some prick, I think which said, ruin your life? One prick ruin life. Which again, I understand that is a real, I don't know if you're watching Matlock with Kathy Bates. There's an episode where I highly recommend.
I do love Kathy.
I love her. But there's a scene where she talks about that, and basically her final monologue is, for me, when I was coming up, it was normalized. But think about all the things that I lost when this violation happened, because I then started to shrink myself essentially and made different career choices because I didn't want to be around this particular man. And I have normalized this for my client that it's just happens. Men do this. And it's like, no. We can't just say men do this.
Nope. Boys will be boys is not
boys will be boys
here.
is not a thing.
Not ideal.
Not ideal.
But Brandon, we get to rewrite a piece of this film right now.
I love this for us.
And then we're gonna do our post-watch rating.
Okay.
And say bye-bye in a second.
Lovely.
So I want to know, we talked about a lot of different things that we could have changed about this movie. What would you rewrite? Is it a certain character? Is it a certain thing that pops up at the end of the screen about Luke and Luke Wilson's character? Like the whole, what are we changing about this?
I really have to give you two.
Give me two.
I have to give you two. One is, I do not think she needs to end up with Luke at the end of this movie.
She's fine by herself.
I want her to, because it's like, you just graduated. You were thinking I already thought you were trying to get married too soon. Like, we were just graduating college. You just went through Harvard Law School. You just found out who the fuck you are. You proved who the fuck you are. You don't need a fucking man, girl. Maybe you like women. I don't know. Maybe you
experiment. Why don't you
experiment? Like, now is the time for you to go explore. So I didn't love the fact
24 also, theoretically.
Literally, she's like you got time. And it was such a, because it's in a line, it's in like a, one of the little chirons at the bottom that's like, he's going to propose to her. You're like, it felt like an exec note. It was like, we got to know that
Wrap it up.
We got to know she has a man. Otherwise, is she a real person?
Right. Exactly.
So I would take that away and really just amplify that she is powerful and strong on her own. And that is enough.
Yes.
But then I think what's more important to rewrite is the sexual assault. That to me is the thing that I would want clued in, that something really bad happened here. If I'm a young person watching this movie, I want to know that this is actually wildly inappropriate, and not just he touched my, that is wildly inappropriate, and that the characters are rallying around her to, I don't need a big devastating scene, but I do need people to acknowledge that she's not wrong.
I have the way to do this.
Please tell me.
I agree with this rewrite, and I also agree that just take away the whole proposal thing. To me, it's fine if they date, but I don't want the proposal. I just want them to be, and they're figuring it out. Maybe that's it. And they're fucking on the regular. Just something quite simple.
And they're fucking on the regular. That's all I want.
Pretty good. But I think we see Vivian when they're visiting Brooke Wyndham in prison say, oh my God, I made a huge mistake, because when Luke Wilson basically says, no, he hit on her, that's why she quit. And we see Vivian say, oh my God, I feel terrible. I made a huge mistake. Directly after that, we could literally see her call Elle and be like, hey, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. That was assault. That is terrible. And I'm here for you. Simple. She could serve as someone who, maybe made a mistake. Not great. Maybe we would even take that part out, but just somehow that maybe Vivian would be the person to offer her some emotional support.
Absolutely. I love that. I love a cut to the end with a little line. He lost his job.
Yes. He got fired.
He got fired.
And,
And that ends
nobody
up-
likes him.
Nobody likes him. There's criminal investigation happening.
Right. What if he was behind bars? That
Literally,
would be
like I want the
ending.
shot, like the final shot,
Right.
the credits roll.
He's in
and
the
it's
orange.
Like, he's in the orange behind bar. Like, yeah, like there's
That could have
simple
been
ways.
in the post credits. That could have
Yes,
happened.
a post credits, or even Holland Taylor's character, just
Right.
saying, "You've got this, and I'll handle that." You know what I'm saying? Like, just like you don't let that man ruin your life, but I will ruin his.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that
Like
would have
a
been
simple,
epic.
And so I feel like that, just like somebody acknowledging for us as the audience, that, like, this is actually quite problematic and
Right.
that it's not Elle's fault.
Yes.
And yeah.
Should we rate the film?
Oh yes, let's rate
Okay.
it. Let's
So
rate it.
given all of these things after the rewatch, 1 to 5 voms, where are you at, Brandon?
I am at a 2.5.
It went up a half a vom.
A half a point.
Okay.
A half a point. I have high standards. I want more people of color. I want more queers.
I like it.
I want some acknowledgement of the white privilege that's overflowing.
Yeah.
And so for that, I'm gonna give it a 2. It's not a 3. It's not midway, but it's a 2.5. I think it's safe
right
to
there.
watch. I think you can keep it on your shelf. I think you can, frame it even if you want.
You don't have to burn the DVD. You can,
Yeah,
you can buy it on Prime, whatever.
Yeah, you can do whatever.
It's
Do the
okay.
thing. It's okay.
Yeah.
It deserves to exist. I think that there are a lot more good to it that outweighs the things that we find problematic. So
totally. I really appreciated your perspective about diversity and queerness and about, assault. And I think that I'm moving mine from a 1 to a 2. It's going a whole bomb up.
Yeah.
And I think that again, it's a great movie, but could always do better.
Yeah.
And so I feel so lucky that I got to have you on today.
Yay.
So thank
I'm
you
so happy
for
to be
being
here.
And dear listener, if you have a rom-com that you remember from growing up, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and leaving a comment on Spotify. And Brandon, thank you so much for joining. You're so amazing.
Thank you for having me. So are you. Thank you for having me.
Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our producer is Sadie Leegee. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. If you have a rom-com you remember from growing up and want us to cover it on Rom-Com Bomb, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and leaving a comment on Spotify. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on Instagram @sexedwithdbpodcast. See you next time.